The late afternoon sun spilled through the windows of a quiet little coffee shop nestled on the corner of Main Street. Its wooden floors creaked under the weight of worn shoes and tired hearts. Among the scattered few who sought comfort in caffeine and silence sat a young woman named Ella. She clutched a wrinkled piece of paper in her hands, eyes fixed on the words that had already broken her spirit once. "We regret to inform you, ... She had heard those words too many times. Job interviews, internship applications, scholarship, hopes all slipping through her fingers like water. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched, much like her dreams lately. Across the room, near the window, sat a man no one ever really approached. He wore a tailored navy coat, polished shoes, and the kind of quiet confidence that made people assume he belonged to a different world. That was Mr. Langston. Rumor had it he was a millionaire, a self-made man who had built an empire that no one knew exactly how. People spoke of him in passing, generous, reclusive, mysterious. He didn't smile often, but he looked at people in a way that made them feel seen. Ella glanced at him, then quickly looked away. Something tugged at her, a strange, desperate courage. She rose slowly, still holding the rejection letter, and walked toward him, her palms damp with nervousness. Her voice was soft but steady as she stood by his table. "Excuse me," she said, and he looked up, mildly surprised. "Can I ask you just one question?" There was a pause. His brow lifted slightly, and then, with a simple nod, he gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself into the seat opposite him, unsure if she had just made a mistake, but there was no going back. She unfolded the paper on the table between them, then looked into his calm, unreadable eyes and asked, "How did you become someone people believe in?" The question hung in the air like mist, quiet and fragile. For a moment he didn't speak. Then something softened in his gaze, something that told her he wasn't always the man sitting in front of her now. Mr. Langston leaned back slowly in his chair, his fingers loosely cradling the cup of black coffee in front of him. The café's ambient noise faded into the background as silence stretched between them. Ella fidgeted, worried she'd overstepped, that maybe the question was too personal. But then he looked at her not with annoyance or pride, but with a quiet ache that only comes from remembering a life that once hurt. "I used to sleep in my car," he said softly, eyes still locked on the swirling steam from his cup. "It was an old Ford heater, barely worked. I parked behind gas stations or church lots, wherever no one would notice." He paused, as if checking to see if she believed him. Ella nodded slowly, stunned into stillness. "I had a college degree," he continued, "but no connections, no money, no clean clothes for interviews. People would look at me like I was broken, lazy, invisible. They don't tell you how loud the world gets when no one listens." Ella's heart tightened. She saw the vulnerability under his polished image, the kind of pain that lingered long after it was over. "One morning, I was sitting outside a diner, hungry, exhausted. I wasn't asking for money, just sitting. A man came out and handed me a sandwich and a jacket. No questions, no judgment. He said, 'You don't look like someone who belongs out here.'" His voice cracked just slightly on the last word. "He didn't give me a job, he didn't fix my life, but he gave me something more valuable than anything I ever earned later." Ella leaned in, eyes wide, her earlier hopelessness slowly transforming into awe. "What did he give you?" she whispered. Langston smiled gently, eyes wet with a memory only he could fully understand. "He gave me dignity," he said, "that belief that I was still worth something. Even when I had nothing." The weight of his words settled deeply into Ella's chest. It wasn't success that made someone worthy, it was being seen, heard, and offered a chance. The conversation had gone quiet again, but this time it wasn't awkward. It was full, brimming with something unspoken but deeply understood. Ella sat across from Mr. Langston, no longer just a girl with a rejection letter, but someone who had just glimpsed a life beyond despair, life shaped not by luck, but by grace. She glanced down at the wrinkled letter once more, and then up at him. "I don't want money," she said quietly, almost afraid of how it might sound. "I just want to matter to someone. I want to feel like I still have a chance." Mr. Langston didn't answer immediately. He simply nodded, stood up from his chair, and reached for his coat. "Come with me," he said, not as a command, but as an invitation. Ella hesitated. "Where are we going?" she asked, unsure whether to trust the moment. "Somewhere you can meet people who've asked the same question you just did," he replied. Outside, the wind was sharp, tugging at her coat as she followed him across the street. past the rows of shops and toward a modest brick building she'd walked by 100 times but never noticed. There was no flashy sign, just a simple door with a worn metal handle and a faded placard that read, "The Harbor." He opened it, held it for her, and said, "After I found my footing, I built this. For people who just need someone to believe in them first." Inside was a warm space filled with light chatter, shelves of donated clothes, and a large community table where a few young men and women were sorting papers and talking about their goals. There were computers, job boards, even a small daycare room in the back. A woman with gentle eyes greeted them. "You brought someone new?" she asked, smiling at Ella. "She's not here for help," Langston said, looking at Ella with a knowing pride. "She's here for purpose." Ella looked around, heart pounding. Everything smelled like Hope coffee brewing, papers rustling, laughter in small doses. It wasn't a handout, it was a second beginning, and she was standing right in the middle of it. Ella's days began to look nothing like they had before. Gone were the mornings spent staring at her ceiling, wondering what the point of trying was. Now she woke up with a purpose. Every day she walked to the harbor, not as someone seeking charity, but as someone learning to rebuild herself. Mr. Langston had given her more than access, he had given her mentorship. Under his quiet but watchful guidance, she started volunteering at the shelter, helping with paperwork, organizing job workshops, and really listening to others who, like her, had nearly given up. It wasn't easy. The first few weeks were overwhelming. She often doubted if she belonged, but every time she faltered, someone at the harbor reached out, offered advice, encouragement, or simply a hand on her shoulder. Mr. Langston would sit with her in the evenings, after the noise died down, and teach her how to build a resume, how to speak with confidence, how to carry herself like someone who mattered. "It's not about faking success," he told her once. "It's about remembering that your value doesn't vanish just because others can't see it yet." Slowly, Ella began to believe him. She enrolled in evening classes, applied for internships, and even started tutoring other women who came into the shelter. What surprised her most was how much she had to give. She began leading a weekly seminar for young women, some just out of high school, others escaping abusive homes, teaching them practical skills, but more importantly, sharing her story. One afternoon, as she stood before a group of nervous, hopeful girls, she told them, "I thought I had nothing to offer. But then I asked one question, and someone listened. What he did next didn't just change my life, it reminded me that I still had one." As she looked into their faces full of the same uncertainty she once carried, she felt a shift inside her. She was no longer the girl with the rejection. She was a bridge for others, built from her own broken pieces, now made whole. A full year had passed since Ella first walked into that coffee shop with nothing but a crumpled rejection letter and a question that changed everything. Now, the hall was filled with light, laughter, and the hum of quiet conversations. Streamers lined the walls, and a modest stage had been set up at the front of the room. It was the first official fundraiser for Ella's new non-profit, Forward Grace, an organization dedicated to helping women re-enter the workforce with training, mentorship, and above all dignity. Dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress, Ella stood near the podium, nervously adjusting the microphone. Her eyes scanned the crowd, volunteers, donors, women who had come through the program, now standing confidently in their own shoes. But her gaze paused when she saw him. Mr. Langston, sitting in the front row, hands folded, a rare softness in his eyes. He gave her a small nod, one that said, "You're ready." Ella took a deep breath and began to speak. "A year ago, I was lost. Not just unemployed or uncertain. I was invisible to employers, to the world, and honestly, to myself. I walked into a coffee shop looking for answers, but I didn't expect anyone to actually give me one. I asked a millionaire one question. I asked him how he became someone people believe in." The room was silent, hanging on every word. He didn't give me a lecture, he gave me a story, he gave me time, and eventually, he gave me a chance, not a handout, a chance to stand, to learn, to give back. She paused, her voice catching now. "I stand here today not because I made it alone, but because someone chose to see something in me when I couldn't see it myself. And every woman we help through Forward Grace is proof that compassion doesn't just rescue, it rebuilds." As the room erupted into applause, Ella looked down to see tears in Mr. Langston's eyes. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but this wasn't sadness, it was pride. The kind that comes from witnessing something bloom after being buried. Behind her, the banner read, Believe forward. And in that moment, Ella knew what had begun with one question had become a lifetime of answers. For others,